So I was using this CR100 meter to measure the peak brightness of the Sony X900H in VRR mode, and as part of the process, I had to sync up its read frequency to the refresh rate of the television, and I was only getting a reading of 60Hz, even though the TV has a 120Hz panel, strongly suggesting that in VRR mode, the screen refresh rate was only 60Hz, not 120Hz on the Sony X900H. To investigate further, I altered a test pattern containing these 4 slides that switched from one to the next at 120 frames per second, and then filmed the results using a slow motion camera at 1000 frames per second. Comparing the slow-mo footage side by side, you can see that when VRR mode was disabled, the screen was refreshing twice as fast as when VRR mode was engaged on the X900H. And if I pause the slow-mo capture at roughly the same time here, you can see more residual text in VRR mode, which was refreshing at 60Hz, whereas the 120Hz refresh rate outside of VRR mode allowed the TV to clear away each slide in a quicker manner, so there's less residual image visible. This is the reason why when you engage VRR mode on the Sony X900H or XH90, you would see more motion blurring and smearing, because the LCD screen would only be refreshing at 60Hz, even if you send the TV a 120 frames per second video signal. And this unfortunately leads us to the second downside of using VRR mode on the Sony X900H, higher input lag. When you enable VRR mode on the Sony X900H, this will force you into game mode with many picture settings disabled. However, because of the 60Hz refresh rate in VRR mode, input lag would go up. At 60 FPS, input lag measured 31 milliseconds in VRR mode, compared to 15 milliseconds in regular game mode without VRR. At 120 FPS, input lag measured 14 milliseconds in VRR mode and only 6.5 milliseconds without VRR in game mode. True story. Before measuring these figures, I was wondering why I kept mistiming my braking in VRR mode on the X900H. Now I know. Engaging VRR mode would also disable local dimming on the Sony XH90 or X900H. Now, some owners may think that local dimming is still active, since the picture setting still says medium. But that's because the TV is just displaying the previous local dimming setting before it's disabled and grayed out. If you don't believe me, just switch local dimming to another value in regular game mode without VRR, and then when you engage VRR mode, the same local dimming label will be carried over but grayed out, indicating that local dimming is disabled and inactive, which brings us to downside number 3. Grayish blacks in VRR mode, especially in HDR where backlight has to go up to maximum to achieve the highest peak brightness that the television is capable of. The brighter black floor will affect every single element on screen, resulting in a washed out presentation. Furthermore, you may notice that in VRR mode, the outer portions of the screen would look visibly brighter than the center, which is caused by the narrow viewing angle of the VA-type LCD panel implemented on the Sony X900H. Outside of VRR mode, local dimming could be engaged, and Sony probably applied some backlight compensation too, so the brightness distribution was more even across the entire screen. The combination of local dimming and extended dynamic range is also necessary to concentrate the backlight to achieve the highest peak brightness for HDR presentation. So unsurprisingly, once local dimming was disabled in VRR mode, peak brightness measured lower than outside of VRR mode, with a corresponding drop in the PQ EOTF tracking too, meaning that HDR games would appear dimmer and duller than they should be. Don't get us wrong. The VRR function itself worked well. I saw no tearing or frame drops when displaying this NVIDIA test pattern, compared to outside of VRR mode where you would see visible tearing at multiple levels. Of course, engaging VSync would eliminate the screen tearing, because you're asking the GPU to delay or buffer the frames specifically to eradicate tearing. But this would also lead to occasional stuttering and increased latency. That's why VRR is the gold standard for smooth, responsive gameplay that's free from tearing. That's why hardcore gamers crave so much for VRR to elevate their gaming experience. Yes, Sony has fulfilled its promise of adding VRR support to the X900H, but in its current state, I simply cannot recommend using VRR mode on the television, due to a severe degradation in picture quality caused by 60Hz screen refresh rate, and lack of local dimming. Sony has told another website that this VRR firmware update is not final and may contain bugs, and that there's another official firmware update arriving later this year. So hopefully that will bring some improvements. Although after all the debacle surrounding the MediaTek MT5895 chipset, the TV still couldn't resolve full 4K 120Hz resolution on the latest firmware. I'm keeping my expectations really low. I've informed Sony of these issues with VRR mode, but haven't heard anything back. Besides adding VRR mode, the latest firmware update also changed a few things on the Sony XH90 or X900H. But before I talk about the 4 upsides and the 1 downside, I would like to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Since the pandemic started, some streaming providers including Netflix have throttled the bitrate of certain shows, especially in Europe, resulting in a softer picture with more compression artifacts. This is where a VPN comes in. Surfshark allows you to stream content from another country without needing you to be physically there, so you can watch Netflix at higher bit rates with better picture quality. You can also get more content that's not available in your region, perhaps the US Netflix library, which contains more movie titles. For less than the price of a Big Mac per month, you can use Surfshark on as many devices as you want in your household, all at the same time. There's 24/7 live customer support, a 30-day money-back guarantee, and if you use promo code HDTV test, you will get 83% off and 3 extra months free. So sign up today and give Surfshark a try. I'll put the link in the YouTube description below. The latest firmware update also upgraded the Android TV system on the Sony XH90 or X900H from 9 to 10. But unfortunately, this seemed to have broken smooth playback of 23.976 FPS content. I authored this test pattern myself specifically to verify this issue, and saw intermittent frame skipping as the vertical bar scrolled horizontally across the screen. Interestingly, feeding a non-fractional frame rate of 24p to the television did not elicit the frame skipping. Perhaps even more interestingly, the Philips 806 OLED I reviewed recently also exhibited the same issue, and that TV is equipped with the same MediaTek MT58 SoC and Android 10 platform, just like the Sony X900H. So unless Philips and Sony TV engineers have been exchanging notes secretly, the culprit may be how the MediaTek MT5895 chipset is handling 23.976 FPS content in Android 10. With this in mind, a workaround that X900H owners can potentially use to minimize the occurrence of frame skipping is to send a 60 FPS video signal to the television, then select Motion Flow Custom with smoothness and clearness both set to minimum, and also engage film mode. This will recover 24p cadence from the 60p video signal, thus bypassing direct 23.976 FPS processing. With VRR and 23.976 FPS frame skipping out of the way, it is mostly good news from now on with the latest firmware update. The upgrade to Android 10 has reduced the near black polarization seen in Netflix Dolby Vision content, which we have reported on Sony TVs over the years before 2021. For US owners, the local dimming bug has been fixed, and for European users, the power consumption warning message no longer pops out repeatedly in an annoying manner every time you change a picture setting that affects the backlight. Another upside of upgrading to the latest firmware is that the USB to Ethernet adapter trick now works on the Sony XH90 or X900H, allowing you to finally overcome the 100 megabits per second limitation implemented on the onboard Ethernet port. By plugging a Cable Matters adapter into the USB 3.0 port, I got over 500 megabits per second of download speed. For more details about which adapter to buy and how to use it to turbo boost your wired internet connection speed, please click here for our instruction video.